There is a stretch of road in western Kentucky and Tennessee where you can drive for an hour and not pass a single house. No town, no gas station, no church with the lights on. Just trees, and a herd of bison behind a fence, and a two-lane road called the Trace running down the spine of it. It's a national recreation area now, land between the lakes. 170,000 acres of public forest between two man-made lakes. It looks like wilderness that was always wilderness. It wasn't. People lived here for 200 years. 6 and 7 generations, some of them, on land their families had cleared before Kentucky was a state. Then, one by one, the government moved every last one of them out. Welcome back to Dark History of the Jackson Purchase. Today, land between the lakes. How roughly 900 families lost their homes not to a flood and not to a dam, but to a recreation area. Told plainly, the way they told it. Before the lakes, this peninsula had a name of its own. Between the rivers. The strip of land caught between the lower Tennessee and the Cumberland. It was iron country. 8 furnaces once burned here, starting around 1820, smelting ore out of the hills. The work was brutal, and a good deal of it was done by enslaved men. An 1856 advertisement for the Great Western Furnace sought 80, in its own words, likely and valuable Negro men, experienced furnace hands. When the iron played out, the furnaces went cold, and the towns stayed. The unofficial capital was Golden Pond, a post office since 1848, a dozen businesses by the 1930s, twice burned and twice rebuilt. It had another reputation, too. Through Prohibition, Golden Pond whiskey shipped to Chicago and Detroit and St. Louis, and the county wore the title Moonshine Capital of the World. One resident put the local view plainly. The only difference between what they made and what the licensed distilleries made was the license. What makes this story different is that for the people between the rivers, the government did not come once. It came again and again. First, in the 1930s, the federal government bought up tens of thousands of acres of old furnace land and turned it into a wildlife refuge. Then, in 1944, Kentucky Dam closed and Kentucky Lake rose up the western edge, the story we told last time. Then, starting in the late 1950s, the Army Corps built Barkley Dam on the Cumberland side, and Barkley Lake rose up the east. Old Eddyville and Old Catawba were condemned and rebuilt on higher ground. Some families were moved twice, 3 times, even 4, pushed off one tract, resettling on the next, only to be pushed off that one too. And after all of it, in 1963, the government came back for the narrow ribbon of land left in the middle, everything between the 2 new lakes. There was no new dam this time, no flood to stop, no malaria, no barges. On June 14, 1963, the Kennedy White House put out a press release. Not a law, a press release, announcing that the land between the lakes would become a national recreation area, in its words, a demonstration in resource development. A demonstration. The idea was that a big federal recreation area would draw tourists and lift the whole region up out of poverty. And to make the demonstration work, TVA decided the land had to be, in its chairman's words, before the Senate, completely in public ownership. No holdouts, no private cabins, no one living in the park. Which meant the families who were still there had to go. Not because their farms were in the way of any water, but because a park with people in it wasn't the park they had drawn. The numbers are argued about, so we'll give you the range. TVA's own records say 788 families were relocated. Other counts run to 900, even nearly 1,000, somewhere around 2,500 to 2,700 people. For all of them, TVA hired exactly 2 relocation representatives. The offers were not negotiated. Residents who thought the price was too low and appealed said the agency's answer was to lower the offer, not raise it. One man who grew up there, David Nickel, later put it this way: "They paid us almost nothing for our land. People who resisted, they bulldozed their houses and burned them. They bulldozed our churches. Everything." Their own congressman, Frank Stubblefield, protested that TVA had made misleading promises about which communities would be spared. The promises didn't hold. The post office at Golden Pond closed in 1968. The last residents of the Kentucky side were gone by the fall of 1970. And here is the part the people between the rivers have never let go of. Nickel again. "We were being sacrificed because the federal government thought other people deserved our land more than we did. And that really hurt." Not quite everyone left. A World War II veteran named Cleo Griffin, who had fought in Italy and lived alone near the old model community, would not go. His family kept moving him into town. He kept walking back home. In the end, the government did something it did for no one else. It let him stay. He lived on inside land between the lakes, with electricity and a phone but no running water, family bringing him groceries and water each week, until 1989. His house still stands, the last home left in 170,000 acres of forest. The tourists came, though never in the numbers promised. The bison came. The campgrounds and the trails came. What the families got to keep was the dead. TVA platted more than 200 cemeteries inside the area, more than 250 are known, and left them scattered through the woods. For years, descendants had to fight just for the right to reach them, to mow them, to bury their own. In 1998, Congress finally wrote that access into law. As one woman, Della Backus Oliver, said of the whole thing, "They only bought the land, they never bought the heritage." Another, Margaret Backus Chambers, put it shorter: "The cemeteries are all we've got left." The court fight ended the way these fights usually do. In 1972, a federal appeals court ruled that whether the government even needed to take the land in the first place was, quote, "not subject to judicial review." The taking stood. The people who were born between the rivers still come back. They hold homecomings in the woods where their towns used to be. And they aren't the only ones who come. Hundreds of thousands of visitors a year now, from well beyond western Kentucky. And what they find is, honestly, a beautiful place. There's the Woodlands Nature Station, where a bald eagle or an owl or a red wolf sits a few feet from you. The home place, an 1850s farm worked by hand the way it once was. An elk and bison prairie you drive through slowly while the herd crosses in front of your car. A visitor center and a planetarium at Golden Pond, on the ground where the town used to stand. It became, in the end, exactly the recreation area they were promised it would be. That is either the redemption of the whole thing or the hardest part of it, depending on where your family is buried. There's an overlook there now, above where Golden Pond stood, with a historical marker. One of the people who was born here, David Nickel, once said the thing that would fit on a stone. It no longer belongs to us, but we still belong to it. Drive the trace today, and it looks like a forest that was never anything else. It was something else. It was home to people who were told 3 and 4 times over that the country needed their land more than they did. Thanks for sitting with another story without easy heroes. Every episode so far has been about people taking something, a river, a town, the land itself. Next time, something takes its turn on all of us. In the winter of 1811, the ground under this whole corner of the country began to move. The New Madrid earthquakes, strong enough, they said, to ring church bells hundreds of miles away, and for a few hours, turned the Mississippi to run backward. That story, what the land does when nobody owns it, is next. Until then, keep your porch light on.